Okay, welcome back to the Longview PD On Air podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Vaughn.
I'm Ryan Rocket.
I'm Carrie Higginbotham.
And today we have three guests with us. February, if you're not aware, is Black History Month. And so we brought a couple officers in, and we're going to be talking about Black History Month. So would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Eric Hewitt.
Gene Duffy.
Darian Brown.
Introduce yourself, talk about your position in the PD, how long you've been with Longview PD, and then if you've been in other areas throughout your career, talk a little bit about that.
Really, you know how long that'll take? I've been here a while.
How long's a while?
So how long?
Okay. I've been here 32 and a half years. I started in the jail. I worked there a year. Then I promoted up to a police officer in 1994. Got sworn in, was a FTO for my first 2 years. Then I went to Street Crimes Unit, then in the CID for 16 years.
You say you started at the jail. That's when we had the jail within Longview PD.
Correct.
Not at the county jail that we use now.
Correct.
What was the highlight of your, I guess, the beginning parts of your career from the jail in your first couple of years on the street?
It was very different.
How so?
Well, you go from a controlled environment to the streets of Longview. And you got to understand, when you grow up in the city and police the same city that you grew up in, where you have to police your friends, your family, and things of that nature, it's very difficult.
Yeah. Learning curve.
Big time.
Yeah. Big adjustment. Gene, what about you?
I've been here. I was sworn in February of '96, so almost 29 years I've been here. Before becoming a police officer, I was a student. You know, I started when I was young. I was a police explorer. I became a police explorer when I was 16. From the time I was 16 till I was almost 21, I was an explorer. So I just moved on in from being an explorer to a full-time officer. Well, I say full-time. I was sworn in as a reserve in February of '96. 6 weeks later, I was sworn in full-time. Since I've been here, I was an FTO, a field training officer, for 17 and a half years. I was on the bicycle unit. I was an explorer advisor. I was on the honor guard. And I'm one of the academy instructors at this point. I instruct interacting with drivers who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's cool.
So how long have you known sign language for?
Since high school, I started learning in high school. There was the classes that we took in high school, they intermingled with regular ed as well as the deaf ed. And there was an interpreter, sign language interpreter, in some of the classes that I had interpreting for the deaf ed students. And I was interested, and I just kind of picked up on it, and I started learning, researching myself. And back in the day, they didn't have the internet that you could go on, because now you can go on ASL Pro and learn it. But you had to check out books and the big VHS videos, and that was back in the day. I'm not telling my age, but that's back. But I learned that way. And I'm not the best at it. I can do enough to communicate. That's something, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And for a long time, I didn't use it. But I'm kind of picking back up on it. And somebody seemed to think that I was a subject matter expert in sign language. So now I'm the instructor for that course for TCOL.
That's cool. So you're currently assigned to patrol on evening shift.
I am on patrol, been on patrol my entire career.
And on top of that, I think a lot of people around town know you because you've worked at the school for how long?
About 20, a little over 27 years I worked for the school. And of course, I grew up in Longview. In South Longview is where I grew up. That's home to me.
Which school are you at?
I'm at Foster Middle School, the middle school that I attended.
So when I say you work at the school, and just so everybody's clear, you work in an off-duty security position at the school, not as a school resource officer.
Not as a school resource officer. There was a point when, a couple of years ago, there was no school resource officer for Foster, so I was kind of the fill-in. So I was security/SRO. So I do know how to do the duties of the SRO, but my official title is school security. That's my off-duty job.
I can't tell you how many people all the time, hey, do you know Officer Duffy? You know Officer Duffy?
That's good and bad. I got a phone call yesterday. Hey, somebody said, this is your nephew. I said, yeah, I'll write him a ticket.
That's funny.
Hey, Gene, you did kind of tell your age a little bit ago. You said you was been here 29 years.
I started when I was a baby. I don't mind telling my age. I'm 50.
What drew this to? So you were like basically since you were 16 and an explorer. I mean, you've been around or interacting with in some way.
I grew up 2 blocks from the police department, right just down from Bethel Baptist Church. You can see it. If you step out, you can look over and see the steeple of the church. And when the PD was at 302 West Cotton, I used to walk to my Explorer meeting. We would have weekly police Explorer meetings. I would walk. I just walk down and go to the meeting, walk back. And then it was just convenient for me. My fields of choice were medicine. I either wanted to practice medicine or get into law enforcement in some capacity. So I didn't go into medicine because it would have taken me longer, education-wise, to become a doctor, get into medicine. You had to do the undergrad medical school and then residency when I could just do my time in college. And back then, you didn't even have to have college when I started. You just would have to have a high school. But in the meantime, I had to go to college. I had to go to school. So I became a police officer because I could do that quicker, and I enjoyed it as an explorer. So I think this is where I was supposed to be at this point. This is my chosen profession.
That's cool. What was the initial draw to get you into the Explorer program?
I heard in school there were a couple of other students who were involved in it, and they would say, we're going to competition. We have to go and we compete. And they were telling me about the program. And at the time, there was a supervisor who was over the Explorer program, Sergeant David Hazel, and we had an officer by the name of Peggy Hurlbert. They were what would be considered like par at this point. They were like community officers. So anyway, we would go and do things with them, and I wanted to compete. I wanted to do the traffic stops. I wanted to do the domestic disputes, the family violence, the robberies in progress. That was just fun stuff that we could do. As a young boy, as a kid, you play cops and robbers, and you could actually play cops and robbers and get awarded for the job, the performance that you did, get judged on it by real police officers. So that kind of drew me to it, and it gave me something to do. Because I couldn't get in trouble. My mom wouldn't. I couldn't. That's trouble. It was not an option. So we had to stay occupied. And so that's what I chose to do.
What about you, Mr. Brown?
I've been here for 12 years now. I was with Gray County Sheriff's Office working in the jail before I came over here. They hired me at Longview PD when I was 20 years old. Like Officer Duffy, I too was a police explorer. So I did that during my time at high school. So I had a couple of friends that was involved in the Explorer program, and they invited me out, and I got a part of that. And I always knew I wanted to be in law enforcement because of my great-grandmother. She was one of the first people to be involved in crime watch groups, the Timpson crime watch group to be exact. I remember as a little kid being with her, up with hope, down with dope, picketing in front of people's houses and things of that nature.
Yeah, so, I escorted a lot of people during that time.
Say that again?
I escorted her during that time.
I believe it. So that's how I got to know people like Sergeant Archie Flannery and Clay Winberg and all those type of people. I grew up in the south side of Longview, so people like Officer Duffy and Officer Birdsong, they patrolled the area in which I lived in, and Duffy actually went to school with my parents, so...
Once again, G, your age is coming in.
That's okay.
So, kind of knew this is what I wanted to do, and been doing it ever since. Currently, I was a patrol officer at first, then I eventually became the police area representative, also known as PAR, for Beat 60. Kind of changed the program a little bit, so I ended up taking over all of South Longview. So I had Beats 50 and 60, and now I'm the public information officer.
Cool. And you've recently come into that spot.
Oh, yeah.
How are you liking it so far?
I love my job.
Good.
Hey, LaDarren, who done your background, by the way?
Oh, that was actually you.
Pretty intelligent guy, wasn't he?
At that point in time,
You're kind of talking a lot of crap about everybody's age, but it seems like you've been around longer than everybody else
Older than
here.
everybody in this room.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, old enough to be our grandpa.
I can tell you a story about
How things used to be.
No, about Officer Duffy, about how great a guy he was. When he first started, I had my first child, and she was a Christmas baby. And her birthday, it was her first birthday. You know, you sign up and you do things by seniority. Well, I had to work on her birthday. Jean came over to me and volunteered to work for me on Christmas, my first Christmas with my baby. And that was greatly appreciated.
Man.
Glad I could help.
And how old is she now?
12.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Twice.
She should be almost 30. Right?
Yeah, 29.
So, Eric, what drew you to law enforcement?
Well, you know, as a kid, you always want to be, I always wanted to be a fireman or a police officer. I never thought I'd be a police officer here in Longview. I actually strongly consider DPS. I never wanted to police the same city that I grew up in. I always, we was entrepreneurs. My family owned their own business. So I thought I went to school to be business management, to own my business or be running some company when I got older. But the economy fell out. And I had a person that was my neighbor said, hey, the police department is hiring. And I'm like, oh, great. I'll look into that. So no, you're gonna look into it today because she worked at the unemployment office. She said, well, you're gonna look into it today, or I'm gonna cut your benefits. I said, oh wow,
I'm on my
pass that paper, and the rest is history. I ended up here, and it was the best thing that probably ever happened to me.
So Brown, when you first started here, you had the jail experience and the Explorer experience. That's when I first met you, was when you were Explorer.
Mm-hmm.
How did that set you up, the Explorer program? And I can ask you and Gene both this question, but going through the Explorer program, how did that set you up for the career in law enforcement? Do you feel like it gave you a benefit, a leg up, or anything to build a foundation on?
I will say yes. Being an Explorer here did, for the simple fact it kind of let me know how this place operated. I knew a lot of y'all when I started working here, so it kind of really wasn't like a completely new place to me because I had spent so much time around here. And then working in the jail just really gave me a leg up on knowing charges and things of that nature because I was a booking officer. So I always say I highly recommend anyone going through both of those before they work in the streets, just because it really do give you the ability to learn how to deal with people. It just helps out a lot.
Yeah.
Because most of the people I was dealing with at the jail dealt with out here on the street.
Right.
And then as an Explorer, people who I used to ride with end up becoming my beat partners and stuff like that. And I kind of already knew how they operated and what their expectations were. So I think it helped me out a lot.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said for the relationships that it sounds weird to refer to it that way, but that's what you're doing. Even in a jail setting as a corrections officer, you're still making relationships with the people that come in, right?
Correct.
And there's a lot to be said for the fact that those relationships are what you allow them to be. And had the reward of that comes working on the street later on is you've got a history with some of the people that you wind up dealing with because you've already encountered them and they know who you are as a person, just like you have an idea of who they are as a person.
And I mean, the department really wasn't hiring a lot of 20-year-olds at that point in time.
I think that you are one of two
really
that I'm aware of.
But even
I think it's more than that now.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Officer Hewitt can tell you that most of the people backgrounds took 12 to 18 months, where I think you did mine in like 6 months. I applied in February of that year, and I was hired in June, or started in June. So
it was a long process. Had a lot of hats to wear. So
I got you. But yeah, it definitely was a great benefit to me.
Cool. What about you, Gene?
laid the foundation for me for sure. I mean, even though I grew up here in the city in Longview, the inner workings of the police department I learned as an explorer, and it was, the other officers that, and I came and we did ride-alongs. And I was always somewhere within the PD doing something, whether it was volunteering or something that had to do with Explorer. So when I started, I mean, at one point I was wearing an Explorer uniform, which at the time we had the white tops with the blue stripes down the slacks. Next time I walked in, I was in uniform and I saw some officers and they were like, when did they start letting Explorers wear it? And they were like, no, he's one of us now. He's hired on. And my first FTO, one of my FTOs, Lisa Chatterton, she was, she was dumbfounded. She was like, what? When did you do this? And I was like, you going to be my first FTO. And she said, oh, I didn't know your whole name. So, but they all knew me. And so it laid the foundation. And it made it a lot easier for me. Yeah. And I think that may be why I've been here for so long, because it's just like home to me. It's like a family. This police department is like a second home to me.
Yeah.
You've spent a lot of time here.
I have.
This is a good time for a shameless plug for our Explorer program. Yeah. It is something that we still offer to this day.
Extremely beneficial. I would encourage, if you're interested in law enforcement or not, that could get you interested in it. It would lay the foundation like it did for me. Excellent program.
Very cool.
Because we'd hired several officers
right.
from that.
And as a matter of fact, when I was an Explorer advisor with Judy Ivory, calling my sister, we had Explorers who went into law enforcement from the federal level all the way down to the municipal level. Even DPS. We even had an officer who was one of our Explorers. He came here and he did his full time and actually retired here. Chris Taylor. He was one of my Explorers. He retired.
I had no idea.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about a couple of the firsts here for the Longview Police Department. Our first black officer, his name was Floyd Brown. That was in 1955. Well, Darren, you know a little bit more about this than me.
Well, when I first started, the older population in South Longview, because that's predominantly where I've worked most of my time here, they would always ask me, am I related to Sergeant Brown? And I had no clue who they were talking about. Little did I know, one of the first, because there was two that got hired at the exact same time, Sergeant Floyd Brown and I think his name was O.G. Denton. Both of those were hired under Chief Stone in 1955. Officer Brown eventually became a sergeant and retired in, I think, 1981. So he still has family that lives here in Longview. His daughters are still here. They're still around. In fact, I learned quite a bit about him from them. Found out that I'm actually kind of related to him, not on the Brown side, but on my mom's side of the family.
That was in 1955. So to put that in perspective, when was we've got some stats in here somewhere, the first black officer in the United States, and it's kind of up in the air. There's a couple different resources or
conflicting stories.
Yeah, conflicting stories about when and where it was.
So we've got the first in Washington, D.C. His name was William Henry West. That says 1871.
Said he was a former Union Army soldier, joined the Metropolitan Police Department for D.C. shortly after the Civil War. Perhaps the most famous for arresting President Ulysses S. Grant in 1872 for speeding on his horse-drawn carriage, which is
wow.
That's kind of a cool stat.
This is a trotting zone only, not a run.
It does go on to say, though, it says, however, some sources suggest that there were earlier black individuals serving in law enforcement roles. For example, Samuel J. Battle is often noted as the first black police officer in the New York Police Department. He started in 1911. In Boston, Horatio J. Homer was appointed in 1878 as the city of Boston's first black officer. That seems really early to me, just given the timing of like the civil rights movement. and the rights of individuals in the United States in the 1800s, and I mean even the 1911. That seems to me to be,
well, yeah. When you think about it, the Civil
far
War only
outside
ended
the norm.
40 years before that,
Right.
And I don't think that people put that timeline together all too often. Like the Civil War ended, 40 years before we were taking off in an airplane for the first time.
right.
It wasn't that long ago.
Right.
It just seems that long ago because the books are real big. You have to read to know about it. It wasn't that far ago. And then looking back at this, the other side of that is it took almost 100 years for Longview to see its first black police officer.
We've got going down the list of the first here in Longview. So we talked about Floyd Brown and O.G. Denton.
Yeah.
Then we've got the first black command staff member who promoted all the way up to deputy chief is Darcy Burton. In 1980, he made sergeant. In 1981, lieutenant. And in 1984 was promoted to captain. Now, he still lives here in Longview.
He do.
We saw him not long ago.
In fact, he's a special education teacher right here in the city. He still participates in quite a bit. Sometimes he'll even come to some of the retirement ceremonies because I believe he retired in 2003 from this department. So some of the people like Gene and Hewitt, he know those guys because he was here when they got hired.
So I'm curious from the three of y'all's perspective, specifically you, Eric, because you've been here the longest, and this is since you've been here. How long? How many years have you been here for?
85.
32.
32 years. Over the past 32 years, how has our department changed? How has the city changed as far as the black culture with our black officers, the community, everything, good, bad, ugly?
Well, when I started here, I think we were still going through a change. It was some officers here that I must say that was prejudiced, didn't like black people, worked on the South Side with them. And the reason why I knew this now, they wouldn't act that way with me or around us, but when we got there, the citizen of Longview would tell us what they was doing to them and things of that nature. So from then and now, the professionalism that we have now compared to back then is hands down. Back then, people appreciated you more. Now, the big difference of it is now and then, the people really appreciated you more then, to where the police officer had a lot more respect. Being police, when you drove up or you walked up, they respected you a lot more. Now is the change of it here is they don't respect the police like they used to. Yeah. That's the biggest change that I've noticed.
Do you think the reason for the respect then was just inherent learned respect because they were raised properly? There's just a difference in like a generational difference? Or do you think that was a respect, like a malicious kind of respect because through intimidation? You know what I mean? Like, man, if I don't act right, then
both. I'm gonna say both because one, people was raised to respect the police,
right?
And then two, you were scared of the police because you didn't know what they would do to you at that point. Yeah. So, but when I joined the police force, I had a great chief, Chief Upton. He was nice, well-rounded, very respectful, demanded respect, but he was very honorable. I think Upton was here when you was hired on too, wasn't he?
Upton was not hired. Chief.
What about you, Gene?
I've seen the differences that I've seen, just like as Eric said, there's been some. There was a bit of racism in the older heads that had been here forever because that's the era that they were trained in, that they grew up in, and they would do certain things that they felt were not as bad as if it were on the receiving end. And I say that, when I say that, I mean like they would say different things and it could have a racial overtone, and the citizen on the street would catch it and they would be offended by it and also be like, I don't know what his problem, what's wrong with him? And then when you go to him and you tell him, hey, this is what, as a black officer, this is what I see, or this is what, And it wasn't so bad. It was not as bad when I started because I'm in the later era. I started in the 90s, and that's when you had, Rodney King riots was still fresh. And, you have all these other things that you see in the media, and the media exposes a bunch of things. And when you see what happened in LA with the Rodney King riots and the racial riots that you see, and how police officers were treating people that you see from the civil rights era, people don't have that trust. And black people don't have, we as a race don't have that trust in police officers, because you saw the white officer doing the black citizen this type of way. I can't say that I've ever witnessed something. I've never seen something as bad as what they've shown. I've never witnessed outright brutality. People have come to me and told me that an officer did a certain thing, and I tell them what they need to do in order to address it. Now, as they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. If they're doing something, if something is being done to you and you're offended by it and you want something done about it, you have to do something about it. Mm-hmm. Like Newton's law, if an object is in motion, it will stay in motion until it's acted upon by an outside force. If there is something that, such as racism, blatant racism, it will continue unless there's an outside force that acts upon that to interrupt that motion. So as citizens, it's up to the citizens to go to file the complaints, go to the higher ups to lodge complaints against whatever they feel they've been discriminated against for. So that would be the outside force. I have, like I said, I haven't witnessed it, but people have come to me and I gave them instruction on what to do in order to make a change. And I take them every step of the way, but it would be up to them to do it because I was not there to witness it. I can lead you on how you go about doing it to make a correction for that. But if you don't do it, there won't be a change. So that's what I would encourage.
Hey, Gene, since you've been on patrol your entire career, let's talk about how how difficult it is being a black police officer on the street of Longview and in the city where you grew up at.
Let me tell you, especially for me, I started young. I was 21. I had to wait until I turned 21 in order to get hired on. And I still looked like a teen. I still looked like a kid. I even grew a mustache just to look older. It didn't work. But, and the people, the younger people, especially in the black male community, they would look at you and say, look, what is he going to do? And I was just this little skinny yellow kid walking around, and I looked like a kid. But, I didn't feel like I was any better than anybody else. And I let them know that, look, hey, I'm just somebody with a job and a position that I have to do, that I'm sworn to serve and protect. I'm not here to try to lower you or do anything like that. And, I kind of built a rapport. I mean, and like I said, I grew up here. I never had any issues with anybody. My family, we were a quiet family. We worked for what we wanted and never bothered anybody. Nobody ever bothered us. But the respect was gained. When you get a badge and a gun, people will look at you and think, especially if you're a black person, oh, look at him. He thinks he's all that because he's got a badge and a gun. But, it was up to me to prove them wrong, that I'm just a man like you. I just have a job to do, and I'm sworn to do this job, and I will do this job. And I've never, ever had an issue to the point to where it was an enemy-making experience with anybody, to the point to where I didn't get them to understand my position.
I remember starting in I worked down on the beat with you when I was in FTO, and we would go somewhere and people be talking a lot of noise to all of us, and we'd have people getting fired up, and you just be like, turn around and walk away. Mm-hmm. You always had this sage, simple, well, just turn around and walk away. Like, you don't got to get fired up. Why would you let him get you mad? Just leave.
Don't let them push your buttons. And that's what I tell people all the time. Mm-hmm. And I, as an FTO, I had new officers that would come in and they would get upset because, in this line of work, you will get talked down to. You will get cussed out. You will. People going to do that to you. And it's up to you to shake it off. And I tell my trainees, it's like water on a duck's back.
Mm-hmm.
Let it roll off. So what doesn't break you will make you. It's just gonna make you stronger. Cause you'll get used to it. You'll get used to getting cussed out.
Yeah.
You know.
Solid. Hey, I want to go back to something you said just a minute ago, that at the time that you started in the 90s, there was an inherent distrust from the Black community towards the police. What role did that have in your decision to become a police officer? Was it harder for you to take that step because of the lack
That
of
made
trust?
me want to do it even more to build the public trust. And you see people that had that inherent distrust, and I felt like it was up to me as part of that community to be the liaison to build that, to rebuild the trust. And in Longview, I don't say, I mean, we've had issues, but they're a lot better now.
Yeah.
I can tell you, we are not where we once were. We're not where we're going to be, but at least we're not where we once were.
Yeah. Brown, from a newer officer in comparison to these two.
I'll say some of the issues that they had to deal with, I didn't have to deal with.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I didn't have to deal with it is because they kind of paved the way for officers like me to come in and not have to deal with that type of stuff. I've had conversations with older officers, and they've told me how things once were. And that's the reason why they're like, I had to deal with X, Y, and Z, and I had to fight against X, Y, and Z. So when you did come in, you didn't have to deal with it. So for me, I'm more appreciative to the generations that came before me that did have to deal with that type of stuff, because they put a stop to it, put a halt to it, changed some perspective so I wouldn't have to deal with it.
Yeah. You do a lot of work within the community.
Oh, yeah.
Like a whole lot of work. You're very active. You're a pastor of a church. You're on all kinds of boards and organizations, committees and stuff. What is the view of the public, specifically in the Black community, of the department now? And this is from the outside looking in, not from an officer's perspective, but from the community.
Anyone that's not engaged in criminal activity love us. And even some of those that are engaged in criminal activity, they respect, we got a job to do. They have a quote unquote hustle that they do, but we really don't have a bad relationship with really any part of our community. In years past, recent year past, we've had a lot of protests and things of that nature, not so much here, but in the country. A lot of that didn't occur here because we've had a standard for quite some time on how the officers of Longview PD are going to treat people. And anytime an officer witnessed someone not being treated appropriately, like Officer Duffy said, they have to put a halt to it, or they tell the citizen how to file a complaint, things of that nature. So I think we do a really good job of policing ourselves. So that's the reason why we do have a good working relationship, honestly, with our community.
To keep those standards high.
I would agree. It's no way, and I can speak for Duffy because he's almost been here 30 years. It's no way that we could have been here for 30 plus years and not appreciate the turnaround that the department has towards us, and also the way the community backs us. Because it's not a time when I go out to lunch where someone, either south, north, east, west, where someone come to my table and say, I appreciate the job you do.
Yeah.
So that speaks highly for the Longview Police Department. It's a lot better. I'm telling you. When all the riots happened with the George Floyd situation, that's when our community really started stepping up and telling us how they appreciate the job we do, because they seen us being police officers here and how we treat our citizens compared to how certain cities and states treat their citizens there.
Yeah.
The department that we work for, I mean, I say it all the time. I love this place. I think that we've got great people from the top all the way down, and that's starting at the council and city manager and mayor and the chief, and all the way through the ranks of people that truly want this job to be a professional job. There's a lot of careers out there, a lot of places you can go to work, but this is a place that people want to work at this point.
And you know, when I first started, I was a arrogant little joker, but it was he's now a lieutenant, but he was a sergeant at the time, Kevin Freeman. He pulled me aside, and y'all know how Lieutenant Freeman talks, and he's like, "Hey, bud, I just want you to keep in mind this is not a job, this is a profession. And I need you to always keep in mind that this is a profession." And that really changed my thought process on how I operated, that it is a profession and you need to be professional in the profession. And that doesn't matter what color the officer is. All of us need to be able to carry on the mantra of provide professional policing, because you know, what I do or how I treat a citizen can negatively affect the next officer that they may have to deal with.
And for the next how many years?
Correct. And when it come down, for me, working at Longview High School for God knows how many years, that also helped. Because people, if they see that you love their kids and that you treat their kids right, even if they don't like you, they'll tolerate you a little bit more. Just because, okay, my kid loves you. I don't know you, but my kid loves you. So,
Or I saw you take care of my kid.
yeah.
Yep.
And that's part of what made me really want to do this for a long period of time, was to change the thought process. And like Officer Duffy said, that means I even had to change some stuff about me in order for me to provide that professional level of policing.
Just out of curiosity, so how long? 32? 28, 29?
29.
29.
weeks.
What was the demographics like as an agency when you started?
We had one black female, maybe 6 black males, few white females, maybe I'm going to say under 5, maybe 5 or 6, and the rest white males. No Hispanics.
Okay. So over time, it seems that the demographics of the
It's
agency
it's
is more
starting to change.
representative.
It's starting to change. It's a lot better than what it was.
I know the demographics have changed since I've been here, to where I used to could count on one hand, in 2 hands, how many black officers in general, male and female, we had here. Can't do that anymore.
No.
The numbers that we were able to pull last week shows the national average for agencies our size. The percentage of African American officers is 6.2%. That's national average. With the numbers that we had for our department, we're at 11.2%. So we're almost double the national average, which is that's a benefit for us. It's a huge plus, showing the inclusivity of our department, but how the department reflects the people that we serve.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that's, of course, that's always the goal.
Mm-hmm.
But you can only hire people that qualify.
Yep.
And you can only hire people that apply.
Yes, sir.
I know for a while people were saying that, you know, Longview didn't have enough black and brown officers, and I would tell them all the same thing. Find good people, have them apply. They pass through the process, and guess what? They'll get to work here as well. So I will always remind people of that.
Well, being in the recruiting division for the last 10 years, I've been recruiting since 1999 when A.J. Key came, trying to recruit black officers, more black officers to come into this field, because you want, for the dynamics, you want to change. And we always been effectively trying to get more black officers here at this department.
Maybe another time for a good shameless plug if you were interested in
Call
a career
Eric.
with the Longview Police Department.
There you go.
Contact the Training and Recruiting Division, and you can talk to Officer Eric Hewitt yourself. He'll hook you up.
I will help you all the way.
Yes, sir.
Given how things have changed over the course of our timelines here, do you think that there is still any social stigma that prevents people from applying here? Like people that would be candidates that are black or Hispanic or any of that stuff?
For sure, especially in the black community. We still have a ways to go with gaining
Confidence,
trust, and things of that nature with the black community. Even people want to be officers.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in all this, and not just in this department, but just in this day and time, If you want to change, you have to be that catalyst for change if you want it. If you sit back and do nothing, nothing will be done. There will be no change. So like that law of motion, it will continue to stay in that same direction at that same speed unless acted upon by an outside force. And you can be that outside force. So be that catalyst for change as long as it's change for good.
Yeah. It's a little bit of courage.
I'm glad to say that I am a part of Longview Police Department, and I would not have been here for 29 years if there had not been something positive going on continuously for change.
Well, thank you guys for being on the podcast. We really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to come and talk to us and share some of your perspective. It's nice to hear from you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad to be here.
You have any announcements? If you would like to join the Longview Police Department, you can text Join LPD to 903-912-6975, and you can get that process going. Or you can call Officer Hewitt.
That's right.
903-237-1199.
There you go.
Nailed it.
Well, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Wanna hear you go.